had a best friend that I grew up with like since we were babies, and like they told me that they were asexual, and they started talking to me about like people who are agender, or people who are gender non-binary, or people who are gender fluid. And I was like, oh my God, like that moment when you've heard that like other people feel this way and like other people are just like you're like, it's like relief. You can finally shed like a little bit of a shell, and you're like, oh, man, that feels so good.
That was Grace Gittleman from the CBSN Originals documentary, Gender, the Space Between. We're turning the focus of the conversation now to the challenges teens and parents face when discussing gender identity. With me now is S.J. Miller, whom you saw in the documentary. S.J. is the Deputy Director of Educational Equity Supports and Services at NYU's Metro Center. Jodie Patterson is an LGBTQ advocate and parent of a transgender student right here in New York City. And Laura Jacobs is a psychotherapist and chair of the Board of Directors of the Callen-Lorde Community Health Center. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Laura, in that video we heard Grace talk about that moment of sort of recognition when there's someone else that shows her she's not alone.
Sure.
How important is that recognition at an early age?
You know, so many of us grow up feeling we are alone, whatever our feelings might be. You know, as young kids, as children, as young adults even, we often have a hard time finding a sense of where we fit into this world. For trans youth, or gender nonconforming youth, that can be especially difficult because they don't see role models on TV, they don't see it in schools, they may be the only trans youth in their school, and so they can feel very isolated, and isolation, we know, can lead to things like depression, loneliness, not doing well in school. And for some of these kids, we know that a shocking number have suicidal thoughts or actions. We know that over 40% of trans community has at some point in their life acted on some sort of suicidal ideation. 40%, that's a huge, incredibly shocking number that should scare anybody.
So SJ, the peer-to-peer networks would seem to be critical in this, but what about educational curriculum that sort of formalizes some of the things we've learned about gender fluidity? Is that happening?
It is happening. We're so behind times, though. What I'm seeing are more teachers are trying to take on the identity work and understand ways in which to center trans narratives or gender fluid narratives. But what I'm seeing is that teachers have to reach in to find those characters that might have hair that's different or eyelashes that are different or whatnot, and then kids have to read between the lines. So those narratives aren't there yet. I really appreciate teachers bringing in music and literature and art because there's more fluidity we're seeing in those spaces, but not in text. And my hope is that down the road, kids from a very early age up through college are going to start writing those narratives. And those narratives, that's how the gaze is going to be shifted, because everything right now is based on the cisgender gaze, not on the gender fluid or gender nonconforming gaze.
Jodie, but some parents might say, okay, but what's the right age to start teaching my kids about all of this? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, it's tough. Before it happens, you think that a young child, before it happens to you, you believe a young child could never articulate their gender. But what happened with me and my family is that my trans son, Penelope, articulated it to me at 3.
Wow, how did that happen?
And so I was already behind the gun. Penelope, in the first 2 years, had become a very dark, gloomy, worried, angry child. Bullying, pushing, nail biting, repeated nightmares. I mean, these are classic signs of stress. Not just on a small level, but on a really large level. And we tried everything. We changed vegetables. We changed sleep pattern. We took out dairy. We did all the things that parents...
You didn't know where to look.
Well, we did the things that parents would do. You change environment, right? But it didn't work. And Penelope continued. And so I sat Penelope down one day and I just said, baby, what's really wrong? Like an eye-to-eye conversation with my 3-year-old, which doesn't usually happen. What's really wrong? And Penelope said, well, Mama, because everyone thinks I'm a girl, and I'm not. And so then I thought, well, let me support this strong-willed girl. And I said, however you feel on the inside is fine. And Penelope said, no, Mama, I don't feel like a boy. I am a boy.
Was that so you were immediately pretty receptive to all of this, but was it, I mean, was it ever hard for you to sort of navigate this or even accept it, especially when you stepped away from your child?
To my, I mean, I felt personally guilty. I felt like I had dropped the ball on feminism. Here's my young girl who didn't want to be a girl, Maybe I didn't teach Shirley Chisholm, Billie Jean King, Nina Simone, Aretha Franklin, like the women, the women that we grew up on. I'm a proud woman, and I thought I had dropped the ball with my daughter. Come to find out that this was my son. So I didn't feel equipped. I didn't know how to handle it. I went really dark. It put a strain on our family because I did solo work with this kid. I said, I said, I'll never leave your side because it's so scary. And I ended up not as present in other areas of my life for a very long time.
I want to play a little bit more of the documentary and get all of your thoughts when we come out on the other side. And this is an exchange between two non-binary freshmen at Kansas City Art Institute discussing how their generation views LGBT issues. Let's take a listen.
I think that as a whole, our generation just really wants to do better for, the future, so.
I feel like it's a result of having a lot more awareness about things like this. I feel like if people in the past knew more about these kind of contemporary views on gender and sexuality, that they would also identify with things like that.
Exactly. It's not like it didn't exist then, it's just that we have more resources available to us so that we can educate ourselves about these things.
So SJ, you talked about changing the canon, so it's not just cisgender writers and artists that are sort of setting the standard. How encouraged are you when you hear those millennials, those kids talking about where we're going on this issue in particular?
I'm so touched because one thing that I'm realizing is that kids are gender woke. They are gender woke, and they're turning to Tumblr and Instagram and apps and different media representations to find themselves, which is great, but it's a problem because they shouldn't have to be forced to go outside of the system. I've been cataloging terms on Tumblr, and right now I have 500 terms that I've never even heard of as an adult, and that's coming from the activism within the systems that these kids are operating within, and they are teaching and educating each other. There's a Trans Student Educators Network, just like we have GLSEN, but these are kids teaching kids and kids teaching adults. They should not have to be their own advocates, right? But they're teaching us how to be advocates for them and with them, and we need to continue that trajectory.
And one day those kids will be adults.
That's right.
So the generation changes. S.J. Miller, Jodie Patterson, Laura Jacobs, thank you all for your time and thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.